The most powerful rocket in human history, built to take us to Mars, sits captive on its own launch, but it isn't a rival nation or a technical glitch holding it back. It's paperwork. A single government agency, the Federal Aviation Administration, has the power to ground the most ambitious space program in a generation with the stroke of a pen. This isn't just a story about building rockets. It's the story of a silent conflict between innovation moving at the speed of light and regulation moving at the speed of bureaucracy, a fight that could define humanity's future in space. The dream in the Gatekeeper Starship is more than just a magnificent machine of stainless steel and fire. It's the physical form of Elon Musk's grand ambition to make humanity a multi-planetary species. It's designed for full and rapid reuse, a game-changing leap meant to slash the cost of reaching orbit and, one day, the red planet. This makes the vehicle more than a SpaceX project. It's a national asset. In fact, NASA has staked the future of its Artemis program on Starship, choosing it as the human landing system that will carry American astronauts back to the moon for the first time in over 50 years. But every time this giant rocket prepares to fly, it has to ask for permission. And that permission comes from the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA specifically. It comes from a small, chronically understaffed office within it. The Office of Commercial Space Transportation. Their job isn't to help humanity get to Mars. Their mandate is to protect public safety on Earth. They are the gatekeepers, ensuring that when a 5,000-ton rocket lights up the sky, it doesn't threaten people, property, or the environment below. This is the core of the conflict. SpaceX is racing toward the future, while the FAA's job is to mitigate every possible risk in the present. This clash of missions has set the stage for one of the most consequential standoffs in modern technology. A collision of philosophies, the conflict was almost inevitable, starting as soon as testing began. SpaceX lives by a simple, aggressive philosophy. Move fast and break things. Early Starship prototypes blew up on the test stand and in midair, and each spectacular failure was a lesson packed with data, feeding directly into the next design. To SpaceX, this was just rapid, iterative development. To the FAA, it was a series of mishaps, each one demanding a formal, exhaustive investigation. The first orbital flight test in April 2023 brought the issue into sharp focus. Starship cleared the tower but blew up minutes later over the Gulf of Mexico. The launch itself obliterated the pad, flinging concrete for miles and scorching nearby wildlife habitats. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a rocket, it was about its earthly impact. Environmental groups sued, accusing the FAA of cutting corners on its environmental review for a vehicle of Starship's unprecedented size and power. In response, the FAA's oversight naturally tightened. After every flight that ended in what the agency calls a mishap, a mandatory investigation began. SpaceX would lead it, but the FAA had the final say. This trapped SpaceX in a frustrating cycle: launch, learn, and then wait. The investigation after the first orbital test took 5 months. The one after the second flight took over 3 months. While SpaceX engineers could build and stack a new rocket in a few weeks, the government paperwork, as the company publicly complained, took much, much longer. The regulatory process, not the engineering, became the main bottleneck. The breaking point, the tension hit a new peak with Starship's third and subsequent test flights. With each launch, Starship achieved more reaching space, testing its payload doors, and attempting fuel transfers, but the flights often ended with the loss of the vehicle during its fiery and each time, the cycle repeated. Launch, mishap, investigation, wait. After one flight, for instance, the FAA demanded a mishap investigation just for the loss of the Starship upper stage, even while acknowledging the booster's failure was already covered by pre-approved exceptions. This bureaucratic friction soon became a public flashpoint. SpaceX openly complained it was stuck in a reality where it takes longer to do the government paperwork than it does to design and build the actual hardware. The company warned that this gridlock was a direct threat to America's leadership in space. The FAA, on the other hand, was in an impossible position. How do you regulate a vehicle that is designed to fail as part of its own development? The agency tried to adapt, even pre-approving certain test-induced damage exceptions for later flights, essentially giving SpaceX permission for specific things to go wrong without triggering an automatic, full-scale investigation. But the situation only grew more complex. The FAA expanded the hazard areas for flights, impacting air and sea traffic across vast distances. Yet, at the same time, the agency approved a license modification to potentially allow SpaceX to launch up to 25 times a year. This created a bizarre paradox. SpaceX had a license for more launches than ever, but was often grounded by the investigation of the last one. The bottleneck wasn't just a delay, it was a system straining to reconcile to fundamentally opposed ideas of progress. The tremors of delay, the consequences of this gridlock ripple far beyond the launch pad in Texas. They strike at the very heart of America's ambitions to return to the moon. NASA's Artemis program is critically dependent on a flight-ready Starship. The Artemis 3 mission, which aims to land the first woman and first person of color on the moon, simply cannot happen without it. This relentless cycle of FAA-mandated delays has had a direct and severe impact on the Artemis timeline. The target for that historic moon landing has already slipped from 2025 to September 2026, and as of late 2024, was pushed again to mid-2027, while other issues, like problems with NASA's own Orion capsule, have contributed to these delays. Starship's readiness is a primary factor. A SpaceX vice president, Jessica Jensen, has estimated that it will take around 10 successful test flights before Starship is proven for a crewed lunar mission. That's a target made immensely harder to reach when there are multi-month delays between each attempt. NASA's overdependence on a single company for such a critical mission has not gone unnoticed, triggering scrutiny from Congress. The situation forces NASA to consider expensive alternatives or risk even longer delays, jeopardizing American leadership in the new race to the moon. Every day Starship sits on the ground isn't just a financial strain on space. It is another day that the grand vision of a permanent human presence on the moon and Mars recedes further into the future. This struggle between the drive to innovate and the duty to regulate is shaping the next 50 years of human history. It begs a critical question. How do we strike the right balance between moving fast and staying safe? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you find these explorations into technology and policy valuable, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next in the future of space exploration. It's easy to cast this as a story of a heroic innovator versus a faceless bureaucracy, but that misses the point. The FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation isn't an enemy of progress. It's an agency drowning in an exponential surge in launches without a proportional increase in resources. In the last few years, the number of licensed launches has skyrocketed, but the FAA has struggled to hire and retain the specialized staff it needs, often losing them to the very companies it regulates. It is trying to apply a regulatory framework from a different era to a company building technology for the next one. The path forward isn't a war to be won, but a process that needs reform. SpaceX may need to treat regulatory compliance not as a final hurdle, but as a core part of its mission from the very beginning. The FAA, in turn, must continue to evolve to avoid stifling the very industry it's meant to oversee. The saga of Starship and the FAA is more than a corporate dispute. It's a preview of a defining challenge of our time. How do we govern technologies that are evolving faster than we can understand them? The answer we find won't just decide a launch schedule. It'll determine whether the dream of cities on Mars remains science fiction or becomes the next great chapter in our history.